Good morning, SMPS. How are we? Caffeinated, I hope. Fair warning, this stuff goes by fast and it goes bad fast. So be aware that if you're watching the replay of this, maybe in a month or so, it's already out of date. If you'd like these slides, they'll be up available at wherecanigettheslides.com. If it feels like things are going too fast for you, it's too much to keep up on it, you're not alone, it's not you. We are seeing exponential change happening. We used to have one major revolution every couple of hundred years, and in the last 2 decades, we've had 4 of them. The most recent one, generative AI. You can't read any publication without running into something like ChatGPT or Google's Gemini or all these different services that allow you to really do some cool stuff with AI. So these tools are proliferating and they will be in everything. When you hear in the lingo of AI, when you hear the word model, all that means is software. In the same way that Microsoft Word or AutoCAD are pieces of software written by humans for humans, a model is AI software written by AI for AI's use. And this is important because a lot of the times we talk about tools and their interfaces, and what we're really talking about is sort of the infrastructure around the model. You and I, we do not talk to models directly. You can't. They're made by AI for AI. So you'll hear about tools like ChatGPT or Google Gemini. And then there's the model names like Claude 3 Opus, GPT-4 Turbo, Command R+, clearly not named by marketers. Why you need to know this is because more and more tools are giving you a choice of what model you want to use for any particular given task. So understanding that the model is different from the software is really important for understanding how to use what model and when. So what the heck is this stuff? It all starts with this quote from John Rupert Firth in 1957. "You shall know a word by the company it keeps." All language that we use is statistical relationships. If I say, I'm brewing the tea, there's a good chance if I'm speaking North American English, I'm just talking about a beverage with hot water and dried leaves, right? If I change one word, other words can change their meaning. If I say, I'm spilling the tea, I'm not talking about pouring my beverage on the floor, I'm talking about gossip. Changing one word changed another word, and that statistical association is how computers know what language is. So how do these tools work? Here's the unhelpful version. This is from 2017, Google's Transformers model. It is much too early on a Friday morning to talk about the calculus that goes into this. So what you need to know is that the data that these models are based on, these companies took all of the text on the internet, boiled it down to statistics. What word appears next to other word? What phrases appear next to other phrases? And built these statistical libraries. That's what a model is. It's a really big statistical library. If you were to think of a piece of text, like a blog post you wrote, an email, as like a pizza, then a model is just a cookbook. It's a cookbook of all the pizzas that company has seen. If you were to go around the world and eat pizza in every possible place and take notes, by the time you were done, you would have 2 things. You would have the most comprehensive cookbook ever written on pizza. You would also have severe illness. And then if someone came to you and said, hey, do you think you could imagine a pizza that had mushroom and pineapple on it? 40% of the room is immediately out. You could, because you've seen something like that. That's how language models work. When you proposition them with, hey, write me this email, build this blog post, analyze this document, they have seen so much information like that that it's relatively straightforward for them to create something like that on your behalf. The way we talk to these models is with a technique called prompt engineering. When you're talking to these models, you are programming. You are a developer, except you're not programming in C++ or Java or Python. You're programming in English or Spanish or Danish. And we do this through language, right? If we use the right words, we will get good results. Take, for example, the phrase B2B marketing. Behind the scenes, conceptually, what these models are doing is kind of like building really big word clouds. And every word that you type into this prompt creates another word cloud. And as it does this, these intersections of where the word clouds overlap is how the model knows what to spit out. So if I say, list the best performing marketing strategies for AEC firms in 2024, That's a very short prompt, right? It's a very short piece of software. I get a really generic, bland, boring, not particularly helpful piece of text out. Why? I didn't give it enough words. I didn't give it enough words, and therefore it did not spit out really interesting intersections. You got, content marketing, SEO, thought leadership, the usual stuff. If I add more words, if I say, list the best performing marketing strategies for AEC firms in 2024 for firms with under 50 employees specializing in industrial construction, now I get different recommendations, right? Understanding your niche, the client's pain points, and then some more targeted, tailored marketing strategies. More words, bigger word clouds, more overlap, better results. If I go hog wild and I say, list the best performing marketing strategies, our firm is active on LinkedIn with key personnel posting content, we have videos on YouTube, we got a podcast, we got a newsletter, we're doing all these things. I'm providing a lot of words into that prompt. I'm creating a very large piece of initial software, and what I get out is customized. It's unique, it's detailed, it's focused on me and what I want the model to do. So if you take, I could continue to say, hey, show me more and more unique things. I'm doing this, I've tried that, I've done these basics. And you can keep getting to really, really insightful things. So here's some recommendations that came up with for unconventional marketing ideas for AEC firms. Augmented reality walkthroughs, 3D printed models of your builds, right? Industrial construction time lapses, expert live streams, data-driven infographics. When you're using these tools, you just keep adding more and more words in these conversations, and they will narrow it down further and further until you get exactly what you want. If you remember nothing else from this talk today, remember this. The more relevant words you use, the better your prompts will perform. The more relevant words you use, the better your prompts will perform. Today's tools have short-term memories that can hold 700,000 words at a time. You could give them books to read, entire books, and they're able to do that. So keep that in mind. The prompt structure I recommend you start with is one we call RACE: role, action, context, execute. First, you tell a model who it is. Hey, you're a Google Analytics certified professional. You know Google Analytics 4, Tag Manager, BigQuery, Looker Studio, blah, blah, blah. All of those are essentially keywords that the model is now loading. Oh, I have to remember this knowledge. I have to remember this knowledge, bringing in all these pieces. Action. Your first task is to examine this table of channel grouping data and provide a composition and analysis, telling the model what to do. Again, more relevant words. This is the kind of thing, these are the action steps I want you to take. Context, a bunch of data. And again, these tools can hold huge amounts of data. And then execute, do this thing. Here's what I want, here's the format I want it in. When you use this structure, you typically get fairly good results. Here's an example. I get a nice table of my data, and I get recommendations for me based on my data. Think about the tools you have access to for your marketing data. What would happen if you were to take that data, put it into these tools, and ask for recommendations specific to your company? That's how these tools work. The more specific you are, the more relevant words you provide, the better you perform. There's a free download, no form to fill out. If you go to TrustInsights.ai/prompt sheet, you can get this PDF and print it out. And again, the slides are available, so you'll get a copy of this afterwards. If you're unsure how to work with these models, think of them as the world's smartest interns, right? Think of this as an intern with 255 PhDs. They know everything about everything, but they're still an intern, right? You would never say to the intern, hey, go write me a blog post, right? You will get a really bad result. You would never say to an intern, oh, just look over this accounting data and tell me if you see anything wrong, right? That's so vague. If you had that intern, you would give them specific, detailed instructions. Hey, intern, do this with this stuff. And the intern would do a good job with it. The same is true of these models. Treat them as the world's smartest, most forgetful interns. Every time you go to talk with them the next time, it's forgotten everything. So you have to start over, but they're really smart. The other thing to do is to build a prompt library. This is some storage mechanism for you to store your prompts as you write them, and critically, for you to share them with people in your company, because when you work together, you will tune each other's prompts and build bigger, better, more robust ones. Use any note-taking tool. I use one called Joplin. You can use Evernote. You can use Microsoft OneNote. If you're trapped on the seventh circle of hell, you can use Microsoft SharePoint. Sorry. But whatever you use, have something that can share these things with the people on your team, because that's how you scale this stuff. You start sharing it. So let's talk about use cases. How do you use these tools? The challenge with language models is that they're good at language. What function in your company does not use language? Right? None of them. Everything from the corner office to the mailroom uses language. So there's an infinite number of use cases. So instead we look at use case categories, and there's 6 of them. Generation, extraction, summarization, rewriting, classification, and question answering. And these 6 broad categories are sort of like Legos as you look at tasks within your company, within your department, within your job. What do they fall, which of these 6 buckets do they fall in? Generation, we all know, hey, write me a blog post, right? Blog post outline about digital transformation, sustainability, and AEC. Like everybody knows this, we won't need to spend some time on it. However, again, this is language. These tools can write anything. So a client came to me and said, hey, we just put this stuff on our website. Can it write a privacy policy? Yes, we've all seen privacy policies. So it generated one. I handed it to a human lawyer to review because you never, ever, ever take high-risk text like legal or financial or health data, and you never just hand that to somebody without a human reviewing it. And the lawyer said, yeah, that was pretty good. That was not bad. There were a couple things it missed, but for the most part, it sped up the process dramatically. These tools are incredible coders for writing software. Every programming language that has ever been seen on the internet, these tools can generate. You might have a repeatable task that you do every month, writing this report, generating this thing. There's a good chance there's a programming language that could accomplish that task for you and dramatically speed up your work. You would have to ask the model, write me code to turn this spreadsheet into a slide, right? And it would help you through that, and you would get that tool that then what used to take you 3 hours at the end of the month takes you 3 seconds now. You just hit go on the code, and it runs, and you get your thing. Here's an example. I was looking for a banner for my blog. I wanted to put a banner up saying, hey, this post is old. And there's all these services that are like $14.99 a month for this. I'm like, I don't need to pay that for a banner. So I said to the tool, can you write me a plugin for my website that does this? And it said, sure. So it did. I put it up, and it works really, really well. So well, I gave it away. That's how these tools work. Anything that you're paying money for as services right now in your company, think about, is that something that a tool could help you write your own software to do it your way and save you time and money? Second is extraction, taking data out of data. I pointed this tool at Netflix's jobs page out of curiosity and said, what are all the jobs that are open at Netflix? And it pulls all the data out, it extracts it. Super handy, so I don't have to do all that copying and pasting. And with this data, you can start to do interesting stuff with it. There's one website called Sweco, I think it's pronounced Sweco, an AEC firm, and they had like 82 pages of jobs. So extracted all of them and said, tell me what Sweco's overall corporate strategy is, because you don't hire 82 pages worth of people if you don't have some major initiatives. And it looked at all this data that we extracted and said, hey, here's what Sweco's up to: transportation, water, energy, environmental consulting, management consulting. Like, that's pretty cool. I can get competitive intelligence just by extracting data from competitors' websites. I can take these things and extract useful knowledge out of really complex text. The FTC just passed its non-compete ruling, banning non-competes in the USA. This PDF, if you read it, was 540 pages long. No one's reading that. I said, analyze this from the perspective of AEC firms. Extract out the relevant portions and tell me what's important. There's a ban on new non-competes. Existing non-competes may or may not be holdable. Sale of business exceptions. So from this legislation, I can figure out what is relevant to me, what's relevant to you. And then I said, okay, let's do some thinking about this. What does this mean for AEC firms? Increased talent mobility, right? Challenges for employee retention, changes in recruitment, potential for increased litigation. So there's all these challenges that come out of this law. When you see something that could impact your business, your industry, and you're not clear about it, stick it in a model, extract out the relevant portions, and say, what does this mean for me? Any legislation. Tennessee just passed the Elvis Act, banning deepfakes. You could say, here's the legislation. What does this mean for me? You have customers. Those customers give you feedback. They give you information. Take that feedback and extract out the useful parts. My teacher has a martial arts school and a bunch of 5-star reviews on Google. I said, let's extract all that information out, boil it down, and write some social media posts for his school because he was struggling with, how do I say stuff on Instagram? said, don't bother saying it yourself, just use the customer's words, right? So they're actually using the voice of the customer. Extract that information out and put it to use. Third category is summarization. Make big data into small data. One of the most useful use cases I know of is dealing with meetings. I'm in meetings all the time. Most of the time I forget what I said. So there's all these recordings and transcripts, and I can just hand to the language model and say, please tell me, what did I promise? What did I say in this call? And it boils down to meeting notes and action items. This is so helpful for keeping track of things that you said, things that happened that are important, maybe even meetings that you weren't able to attend. Yeah, you can just get a transcript and boil down the important parts. There are some tools, this one's called Otter, that do it for you, right? You can just turn on that little meeting assistant, it makes a transcript while you're on the call, and then summarizes and says, hey, here's what happened in this meeting. It's a great way to increase your productivity and not have to relive the meeting. These tools can take large amounts of text from your stakeholders and boil them down. This is an example. A company wanted a mission statement, so we did 20 interviews with 20 different stakeholders and said, okay, language model, here's all the interviews. Boil this down into a single mission statement. And what we got was, everyone agreed was pretty okay as things go with consulting. No one was thrilled with it, but no one was offended by it. So taking all this information is boiling it down. You probably have, or you have customers who have things like review data. This is a synthetic example because the real example is under NDA. This company had 500 Yelp reviews, and they said, we need to figure out what's in them and what to do about them. Because great, let's summarize it, boil it down. Tell me 3 things this company does well based on company reviews. Tell me 3 things this company does poorly based on reviews, and then tell me 3 things what to do next. And it does a great job. It says, your star rating is 2.9, so you got a lot of work to do. People like this food, but you keep serving it cold. These are great professional development tools. How many people avidly keep track of what Google's up to when it comes to SEO and the Google algorithm? And nobody. Like one person. There's a lot that happens, and there's a lot of information out there, and most of it is pretty obtuse. Last November, a large change came out to Google's algorithm, and all these YouTubers started putting up 30, 40, 50-minute videos. Here's what my opinion is on this thing. I'm like, cool. I don't want to spend 40 hours listening to that. So I took the transcripts from that, boiled it down, said, just make me a list of what these people said, deduplicate it, and I have that list of 30 things, like 3 of them were relevant. So I saved myself 40 hours of suffering of all these bombastic, very loud talkers, and turned it into just a few summaries. If you use Google's Gemini, even the free version, you can actually talk to it and say, hey, here's a YouTube video, summarize it for me. This is at YouTube, summarize this video. This is an example. My CEO and one of her agency friends had this 40-minute long podcast. I love listening to these folks talk, but that day I was in a hurry, said summarize it, boom, I got a very quick snapshot. Think of all the videos that you see on YouTube. Wouldn't it be nice to do a summary first before you decide to invest 30 minutes in watching it? Fourth is rewriting. Turn one form of text into another. Right? This is an NDA. I got this NDA from this guy, and I read it, and I was like, were you drunk when you wrote this? Did you copy and paste off of Reddit? What happened? Turns out both things were true. And I said to the language model, rewrite this for me, make it a proper NDA, and it did. It rewrote it. I handed it to my lawyer. My lawyer said, yes, you can sign this version. Don't sign the original. It was unenforceable. So anything, think about contracts that you have to read and redline. Have machines help you with that. Last year I had the pleasure of doing a workshop with SMPS down in DC, and folks were talking all about BIM, Building Information Management. Like, what is this thing? I don't understand this thing. So I said, explain the importance of BIM in terms of pizza. And it said, you pre-plan the pizza, everybody agrees on it, then you make a virtual version of the pizza, and everybody looks at it and says, that doesn't look right, and fixes it, and then you finally make the pizza. I'm like, oh, it's like a digital twin of the pizza. And they're like, yeah, that's what it is. Like, I had no idea. And with these tools, I was able to ask and have it summarized in a language that I understand. You have something that you know well, music, cooking, golf, you name it. There's something that you know so well. You can ask any of these tools in a meeting even, or in a conference. You open your phone and say, explain this to me in terms of the circle of fifths, or explain this to me in terms of chord progressions, or explain this to me in terms of painting. And whatever the concept is, the tools can reformat it so it fits your brain. So any concept. This is a tremendous professional development tool. You can rewrite just about anything. Here's a real memo. Bob, you sent over 2 months of invoices in one day. Of course it's not done. It's not going to be done anytime soon because this stuff takes time. And if you needed it sooner, you shouldn't have let it sit on your effing desk for 2 weeks. You can F right off and you'll get it when you get it. Go F yourself, Karen, in accounting. And then you say to the language model, rewrite this in a professional tone of voice. Dear Bob, I hope this message finds you well. If there's ever been something you wanted to say, like, yep, I'm going to get fired if I send this, say it to a language model and say, okay, now help me rewrite this in a way that is professional or appropriate, or maybe strongly worded, but whatever it is, you can rewrite text. The fifth category is classification. Understand what is in the pile of text. Here's a bunch of Instagram posts, and I said, I just want you to give me the sentiment, -5 to +5, on this huge spreadsheet. And the tool classified these posts, right? Again, it's all language, so it's just putting numbers to language. Any type of data where you've got a lot of data laying around that is text, you can have these tools classify. Customer complaints, literally anything. Yesterday, I was writing up a scope of work, and I took an entire mailbox of correspondence with this one client, and I said, summarize and classify the things we've talked about and what's still not done on the scope of work. It would have taken me a week to go through 2 years worth of emails. Instead, the model took 42 seconds and gave me a summary, right? So I can classify enormous amounts of text. You have things you want to classify, right? Think about like BIM objects in an asset catalog. Maybe you have a bunch of assets that you have not categorized. If there's descriptions with them, you can have a tool build categories and classify all this data, whether it's on your website or in your own asset management systems. And finally, question answering is number 6. We can load data to these tools and ask questions of that data. And this is incredibly powerful because these tools get better with the more data you give them. So this is an example. I gave this RFP because I love responding to RFPs. And it said, tell me what I need to provide out of this RFP. This is a gigantic one from the NHTSA. And it said, hey, here's what you're going to need to provide. Okay, cool. I asked this question. Now I said, here's a prior RFP response I already did. Can you please extract from it and tell me what things I still need to provide to this new RFP, but what things I can reuse? Right? Talk about saving a lot of time. I can ask questions of my data and say, what do I not have to reinvent? And said, oh, here's the things that are in the new RFP that you don't have responses for. Like, oh, that's helpful. And then I gave it another RFP and I said, okay, score my response. Here's the RFP requirements, score it. How well did I do it? It said, hey, you kind of screwed up on platforms. You get a 4 out of 10 because you didn't put enough detail in there. Like, okay, I can go back and fix that. I can go back and edit that. And then I said, you know, I don't really feel like writing this section of the RFP. Write it for me. And it did. And I still check it. Obviously, it's an RFP. You want to make sure it's correct. But in doing this, I took the process of responding to an RFP down from 40 hours to about 2. From 40 hours to about 2, right? And I saved my sanity in the process. Another example, an NDA. I said, tell me if this NDA is fair. And it gave a long list of here's what's good about it and where there's room for improvement. If you've ever had to read a contract and say, okay, is this something that we can sign? You write out your criteria, what you want to set the contract to be, and they say, assess this contract, score it. Tell me if it meets my criteria. Tell me if I should sign it or not. These tools can see, too. I loaded this lovely blueprint from 1888 and said, how does this align with today's AEC best practices? And these tools can look at the image, look at a blueprint or a floor plan and say, okay, here's the things I see in this image. So if you're trying to do a first pass, maybe at a building diagram or a CAD drawing, load it in and have a tool assess it and see, okay, this is what I see in this imagery. So with all these use cases, when should you use AI? There used to be a complicated rubric for this. Now the answer is always. Use it as many places as you can until you find out what you can't use it for. Last summer, Boston Consulting Group and Wharton Business School did a study with their consultants, and they said, we're going to give half the consultants generative AI tools and half the consultants not. And what they found was that consultants who had access to AI tools did 12% more work, 25% faster, and 40% higher quality. And what's fascinating is that in the experimental group, the low performers, the 50% of people who are low performers, once they had access to AI tools, became as high scoring as the high performers in the control group. It turned low performers into high performers in 5 hours. Think about the teams and the staff and the people you work with. What would it be like if you could take everybody in your company who is maybe not as strong a performer and within 5 hours turn them into strong performers? What would that mean for your career? What are the tasks that you're not good at? That's why we want to use these tools as often as we can. And they're incredible at pretty much any language task, including creativity and brainstorming, divergent thinking. In a study by Nature magazine, they did an assessment and said that on average, AI tools are more creative than humans, on average. And the reason is, there are a lot of people with really bad ideas. And the machines have a narrower band of good and bad ideas. When you're doing this, take a look at what things in your company take the most time right now, and are the things that provoke an emotional response from you. Ugh, I don't want to do that. Those are the tasks to look for AI, and then you apply a management consulting framework, purpose, people, process, platform, performance, to turn that task into an AI-driven task. Now, this is not all sunshine and roses. These tools have problems. This is the warning that used to be on OpenAI's website. It has since mysteriously vanished, but it said, our tools, we found that our models more strongly associate European American names with positive sentiment when compared to African American names and negative stereotypes with Black women. So if you're using these tools in a way that's public-facing, like as a chatbot, there are risks if they're not built properly, right? If I go to your website and I use my American name and I use my Korean name, I should get the same level of service. I might not, depending on the type of tool. So you want to be careful when we're using these tools. There are copyright issues on two fronts. One, the data that was used to make these tools is unclear yet. It's not been resolved in court as to whether or not it was a violation of intellectual property, whether it was the models are derivative works or transformative works, and we won't know for 3 or 4 years. Around the world, this varies. In the EU has said using copyrighted data to train a model is a violation of intellectual property rights. In Japan, they said the opposite. They said a model does not in any way resemble the original works, and therefore using original content is not a violation. So depending on where you're located, the laws may be different about how you use these tools. On the flip side, these tools create stuff, and because the tool is creating stuff, it cannot be copyrighted. There's a famous case in 2018 called Naruto versus Slater when this chimpanzee took a selfie. And the photographer tried to copyright it, and the courts ruled, you didn't do the work the chimp did, and chimps can't hold copyright, so this image is in the public domain. That's why you can put it in a slideshow and not have to pay any royalties to use it. When machines make stuff, that is also not copyrightable. So if you put up a blog post that a machine entirely wrote, you can't copyright it. You can't protect that intellectual property because it's not made by a human. When it comes to data protection, how safe are these tools? The golden rule is if you're not paying, your data is the product. So anyone who's using a free tool for a free version of ChatGPT and they're putting data into it, the machines are reading that data and learning from that data. So your data is using it, which is really important because at your firm, there are people who are using these tools now. If you are not providing them paid versions with data protections, your intellectual property is leaking into these tools because the employees are using the free versions. So be aware of that. This is an example of Gemini. You can see the terms of service change as your payment levels go up. And of course, these tools can be misused. Right? We had some fake robocalls recently. We had a cybercrime incident where a deep fake was used to fool a clerk into wiring $200 million somewhere else. Oops. And regulation is coming. The EU has just passed the EU AI Act, which will be like GDPR, but for AI. We won't go into the hundreds of pages of legislation, but the 5 things to keep in mind. The Act says you must deter the use of illegal uses of AI. You must detect and warn on high-risk uses like mortgage decisions or facial recognition. The 2 things that matter to us, we have to document our use of AI. Anytime we're using it, have some paper trail internally so that an auditor can say, yes, you used AI for that, or no, you did not. And when you are putting this content out in the world, you have to disclose it to consumers. This image, this chart, this thing was made by AI. And in the EU, of course, defending the rights of individuals. But the two key pieces for marketers are document and disclose the use of AI always. So how's this going to impact marketing? Funny thing is, consumers don't seem to care. In a study from MIT Sloan, just across the river, last fall, they showed consumers AI-made content and human-made content, and then they disclosed, hey, this was made by AI, this was not. Strangely, across the board, humans preferred the AI content, no matter what it was, to what other human beings created. So if you're saying, oh, I don't want to disclose, well, it's fine. People actually prefer it anyway, and there's no penalty for disclosing the use of AI. This will impact search in particular. If your firm relies on organic search traffic, the Wall Street Journal has an article recently saying an estimated 20 to 40% loss of search traffic, because I'm sure you've been to any number of websites, like say any recipe website, where there's 48 pages of text about this brother's cousin's dog's second cousin's roommate's, how this recipe came. Like, just tell me how much cream cheese to put in the bloody cake. AI tools take all that away. And so it's a better consumer experience. And so that will impact us. That will specifically impact us on unbranded search. So branded search, people will search for you by name. But if someone's saying, I want to learn more about building information management, I want to learn more about sustainable use of steel, they will ask an AI, get a response, and that will be good enough. They won't need to click to go anywhere else. So if you rely on a lot of that traffic is at risk. One of your homework assignments after this morning is go into your company's search console or webmaster tools and look at what percentage of your search traffic is unbranded search, not your brand. If it's over 50%, you're at substantial risk from AI taking that traffic away and therefore taking away things like lead generation. So how do we prevent that, or how do we mitigate that? There's three things to do. Number one, be everywhere. Be in as many places as you can, because these models are scraping up text from the internet. So be a guest on someone's podcast, show up on their Twitch channel, write a guest blog post, submit to a journal, get coverage in the East Peoria Evening News. To these models, a piece of text in the Wall Street Journal is exactly the same as a piece of text in the New York Times, in the East Peoria Evening News, right? There's no difference. So turn your PR strategy on its head and go for more volume, as long as it's not like garbage, as opposed to the higher quality. Press releases actually work again. Not for humans. Humans are not going to read these things. Humans will never read these things. But when you post a paid press release on a wire service, it gets syndicated to hundreds of places around the internet. What does that do? It puts your content on 100 different news sites, and then when the models come by and scrape up all that text to train on it, they will learn who you are through those reoccurrences. Second, have some kind of publication that is under your control, direct to your audience. An email newsletter, text messaging, hell, even direct mail, a magazine, as long as there's no one else's AI in the way. This is critical for retaining your audience and for creating digital signals in search that will still tell people where to find you. And third, have some kind of digital community, or in person as well, but a digital community where you can reach people directly. This is an example of a Slack group that we run called Analytics for Marketers. 3,000 some odd people in here. It is our best focus group, our best way for following up with prospects and things, because we can directly control our interactions with the audience without having someone else's AI in the way. If you've heard of a service called Discord, that would be my recommendation for today as the best platform for doing that. So, what's next? There's a whole lot of change happening right now in this ecosystem, right? There's these new architectures. One's called mixture of experts. Instead of having one model doing a lot of work, these models now have like 8 or 9 of them inside this little wrapper. Google's new Gemini is like that. It's basically like a little office full of models all working together, which is absolutely crazy. There are architectures called like structured state models and one called Mamba. These models are becoming multimodal. They're beginning to understand the real world around us, right? This is an example for this is OpenAI's Sora. This is completely generated. There was no photograph used at all. So these models, which used to create these incoherent, really weird-looking videos, are now able to create hyper-realistic imagery.
I've led I've led movies, features.
Yes, weren't you in that feature last year? You were like the main supporting. I mean, not lead, but you were supporting to the main. That was.
Yeah. That was me.
So
That was OpenAI's, that was Meta's dyadic conversation creator. It takes a talk track and synthesizes human beings. It makes a video of a synthetic human beings having that conversation. So you can take essentially audio and turn it into video that looks hyper-realistic, creating virtual people. Right? Think about a conversation you might have had that with a customer, and you're saying, well, how could I put this, a snippet of this on YouTube, maybe as a testimonial? Customer doesn't want to be on video. Cool. Now have a machine synthesize the customer instead. Here's another one. This is Boston Dynamics Spot Robot.
Greetings, good sirs. May I have the pleasure of knowing your names?
I'm Matt, and that's Vache.
A pleasure to meet you, Matt and Vacha. Shall we commence our journey? The charging stations where Spot robots rest and recharge is our first point of interest. Follow me, gentlemen.
They have hooked a language model to a robot with sensors. So now when this thing inspects a facility and it returns to home base, instead of having to read out a bunch of diagrams or data, it walks up and says, Spot, what did you see in the facility today? It said, dial 15 on station 12 looks a little hot, someone should go fix it. And this is going to have a profound impact on things like building construction and building maintenance, because these tools can now communicate and see and hear and understand their environment. The apex of this was one called Figure 1, where now we're taking a language model and integrating it with human tasks.
Can you explain why you did what you just did while you pick up this trash?
On it. So I gave you the apple because it's the only edible item I could provide you with from the table.
So again, you're having a conversation with a physical entity tied to a language model where it's able to listen to the words that you're saying and perform tasks based on that language, picking up trash while answering questions. Again, think about how this will work in an office, on a construction site, perhaps, in an industrial facility. These tools are evolving so quickly to understand the world around us that they will be coworkers. And we're getting these tools are becoming semi-autonomous. We're building agent networks. Here's an example. This is an agent network I was working on in my hotel room on saying, I want you to go and find commercial real estate listings and then rank and order them based on price per square foot plus some other criteria. And I just give it this prompt, and this thing goes and writes its own software. It brings up its own web browser. It does the work semi-autonomously and then returns the results. You are going to see agents like this happening in every industry and in every person, because you're going to open up your mobile device and you're going to talk to whoever's on that device and say, I want to look for this. I want you to find me some prices on this, and these agents will go out and do these tasks. What that means is that you have to be ready, and your websites and your digital properties have to be ready to interact with buyers who are not human. You have to be ready to interact with buyers who are not human. The easiest shortcut to do that today is to make your site accessible. Right? So if you meet ADA requirements for accessibility today, you will be ready for AI agents to buy from you tomorrow, because they navigate in the same way that a screen reader navigates your website. So make sure that you do that. You can talk to these things in interactive environments. This is an example here, a focus group, right? There's Erica Expert, Nellie Novice, and Indigo Intermediate, and me. Except that I'm the only human in this focus group. Everything else is synthetic, and when you read it, you wouldn't know that these weren't people, that these are actually just machines. Think about taking your ideal customer profiles for your 3 best customers, writing character cards and putting them into a focus group and asking them questions. Here's our new product release. What do you think of it? I have this idea for a campaign. What do you think of it? And your ideal customer profiles can respond as though they were there and give you feedback about your ideas. You can basically have a focus group for any idea when you want it, instead of having to call an actual customer and take up their time. Maybe you'll do this to build a survey, and then you can roll it out to your actual customers. But it's an incredible way to gain insight into your customers' minds just using machines that simulate their language. Probably the most exhaustive use case of agents is this from Fable Studios. They took 11 different AI models, voice and sound and writing, and they wove it together to make an episode of South Park. I'm not going to play it for two reasons. One, they took it down, and two, it's not very funny. The reason it's not very funny is they used a model that's heavily censored, and therefore all the good jokes didn't make it in. But what's crazy is that they commissioned this episode, full episode of South Park, 22 minutes long, audio, video, character animation, scripts, and the model cranked it out in 3 hours. Right? 3 hours. You can't even get a writer's room to agree on a plot in 3 hours. Think about all the templated content that you have in your organization. What would it look like to have machines starting to create that at a much greater scale, maybe without your help? And these tools are going to be everywhere. They're in everything. AutoCAD just announced that they've got some generative capabilities. It's in every Adobe product now. It's in Unity and a bunch of different 3D modeling software packages. Every vendor you use that has even moderately complicated software is going to have some form of generative AI in it in the next year. If they don't, they're probably going out of business, which means that whether or not we want this technology in our firms, it is in our firms and it will be in every single thing that we do. For example, this is HubSpot, the CRM software. There's ChatSpot now that is a generative system. You can talk to it and say, hey, how's my sales pipeline looking? And it will just outright tell you, hey, here's how things are going at your firm. This is the intelligence revolution. Right? This is what's happening now. So let's talk about the one thing that everybody wants to know. Who's going to lose their jobs? And it's a tough thing to answer because there's two extremes. On one end, the Brookings Institute says, AI can't do jobs, it'll just do tasks. And on the other end, OpenAI is saying, AI will take 95% of all jobs, you're all fired. There is a middle, the answer is probably somewhere in the middle. There are definitely jobs that are basically one task that will get consumed by AI because it's a rote repetitive task. There are other jobs which are very complex interweaving tasks that AI will really struggle to do. There are jobs that rely on the value of the human relationship, right? You will probably never willingly accept your hairdresser being replaced by a robot, right? It's probably like, no, no. Part of the human interaction is the value in the relationship. So what will it look like? Well, in 1762, there was this profession called spinster, people who took fiber and wove it into thread. And that year, this device, a spinning jenny, was invented that could do 20 times the amount of work. What happened was, 19 out of 20 spinsters had to go do something else. And 1 out of 20 learned how to operate these machines and be incredibly productive and create a lot more output. What will happen in our organizations is that we will go from being doers to being managers. We will go from being first violin to being the conductor of the orchestra. Now, there's good and bad at this. If you are early and you get skilled up and you're using these tools, you will get to be the conductor of the orchestra, and that comes with things like higher pay, more prestige, more interesting work. If you are later to the game, which is no one in this room, because if that was true, I wouldn't be here, then you are no longer playing violin because we don't need a second and third violin anymore when we have machines to do it. So the warning is to get used to the stuff, get comfortable with the stuff sooner rather than later. How will this play out for employment? Depends on the kind of company you work for. If you work for a company that is very progressive, they will say, hey, great, let's take all these boring, mind-numbing tasks like RFP response writing, and let's outsource that to machines and upskill you into doing more of the things that you're uniquely valuable at. If you work at a less progressive company, they will just trim headcount as fast as they possibly can. I was talking to a company last month that said they just got rid of 80% of their marketing department because they're sure that generative AI can just do most of their jobs. I'm like, well, I think you might have been a bit premature on that. But that is the mindset at less progressive companies. Let's cut headcount as fast as possible. So your level of risk depends on the kind of company you work at. What is clear is that this technology change is happening faster than it ever has before. In previous generations, when a major transformational technology came out, it was generational. You did it one way, your kids did it a different way, right? There was no reskilling because your kids just grew up doing it a different way. AI is changing things within the span of a decade. And so there is going to be a lot of dislocation. There is going to be a lot of short-term change because the new jobs that AI will create don't fully exist yet. They're starting to come out, They don't fully exist yet. So the warning to everyone here is don't be complacent in your job. Don't assume that AI is not going to do parts of your job. Figure out how to get in front of it so that you are the one doing the thing and not the machines. So some final thoughts for you. The bare minimum set of tools that I recommend you get comfortable with are Google's Gemini, ChatGPT, and Microsoft Copilot. 80 to 90% of AI tasks you can do with these three tools: generating images, analyzing images, etc. But these are the bare minimum. There's a slightly more thorough version, again, you'll get a copy of the slides, that lists out specific tasks and which model tends to be good for those tasks. For example, there's a whole series of tools for very sensitive data where you can't let that data get into a third party no matter what the service agreement says. Maybe if you do some defense contracting, so there's a set of tools for that as well. But be aware of what's available for tooling. In the very near future, like tomorrow, two things will set apart you and your company in the age of AI. Number one is the quality and quantity of your data. As you've seen through the use cases, the more data you provide, the better the output of the tool gets. You have data that no one else has. If you can find it and use it, you will be able to create better outputs than a competitor. So the quality and quantity of your data matters. The second thing is the quality and quantity of your ideas. Skill is no longer the barrier to entry that it used to be. Right? These tools can write, they can draw, they can sing. I can sing, but you don't want to hear it. But with these tools, I can write, I can compose music, I can build artworks. And are they as good as a human? Well, they're better than this human can do. So skill is no longer the obstacle, which means that the best and the most ideas will win. So your value as a person, your value as a company is who has the most best ideas. And then you let AI bring those ideas to life. To wrap up, there's a free book and a not at all free course. However, if you are not busy next month, the fourth week of May, SMPS is having a 2-day workshop in Los Angeles that will take basically everything we just talked about and spread it out over 2 days so that you can dig in. We'll do a lot of examples. So if that's of interest, go check out the SMPS website for that. And with that, thank you very much.